we received quite a lot of questions and will now, read. We sorted them a little bit in the background, and now we are starting with the first one, which is related to the choice of the LLM. Is there any specific reason why you used Claude and not other LLMs like Gemini or ChatGPT for this task?
Yes, this is an interesting question. We had a specific reason at this time because Claude had the largest context window available at this time. So it means that it was able to process quite a lot of data. And this was at a time where, for example, ChatGPT really had problems to process long documents. And Claude I think it has changed a little bit also, but Claude was really good at this. This was the reason, the main reason.
Yes. Okay. We have another one regarding contamination or contamination bias. There were some questions and I tried to summarize them. How did you know Claude hadn't seen the RCT, risk of bias assessment, yet and hasn't therefore been trained on the human risk of bias assessment from the published articles?
Yeah, that's interesting also. So the short answer is we don't know because it could be, but I mentioned before during the prompt engineering, we avoided using the term ROB2 or Cochrane risk of bias tool, and we also provided quite detailed instructions. So therefore, we hope, this was one measure to avoid that Claude just recalled those information. And I think it's also not so not so likely that it recalled the judgments from its training data because it was just so bad. It should have produced better results, I think, if it had been in the training data. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. So another person added something to the question, suggesting that maybe results from a prospective design comparing humans versus Claude using RCTs that have never been assessed for risk of bias before would be more reliable as comparison. So what it is not, it's maybe more like a comment.
I agree with that. Yeah. So this would be you maybe just take RCTs which have been recently published and produce expert reference standards with 10 people experienced in risk of bias assessment. Then maybe you really have or could have a good reference standard and make sure that there's no data contamination.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. We have the next one, which is related to access to papers or paywall. How have you handled papers behind paywall? Or do you only use AI for open access papers? Maybe you can clarify this question a little bit.
Yes, this is also an interesting one. So no, we did not use only open access paper. We also use papers which we accessed by our institutional license. And we also thought about this a lot, whether we are allowed to upload those papers. But so this is also maybe a reason why where we were lucky that we chose Claude, because Claude it says at least in terms of and conditions that it does not use the uploaded content for example training so yes, but it's still an interesting question, and maybe also with other large language models, I think, one need to be quite careful. But yeah, this is something to consider.
Hmm. Yeah. It's maybe more or less a gray zone in many fields. And what I'm aware of is that researchers are very unsure about this point often. Yeah. So the next one is about time saving, also very interesting in my opinion. And the person said, I'm interested in the time saving aspect. If the results were better than they are, and if you made the prompts available to others, how much time do you estimate would be saved by using Claude? You still have to customize a lot and make it available to Claude. So
Yeah,
could you
yeah.
comment on this one?
Yeah, so we didn't record, or we didn't officially collect the time that was necessary to conduct, or to conduct the testing. And it was also a bit difficult because Claude sometimes, so it depended on the daytime how quick it was. But I can say that it does not took quite long. So I think, if I remember it correctly, it took maybe 2 or 3 hours to run the whole process, or maybe 4 or so. I think I have it in the paper, but I forgot about it. I have to look it up, or yeah. But it would be a huge saving, because yes, every one of you who conducted risk of bias assessment may agree that, yeah, conducting an assessment will take at least 1 hour, I think, or 2 or 3 even. Yeah, so it would be a huge time saving, but of course the results are not good, and so we can't really use it.
Yeah, but are the prompts are they specific for a certain field, a clinic field, or are they very generic, just related to risk of bias wording? So this might
Ah,
also be interesting regarding the transfer of the prompts to other fields, maybe. This was my
yeah.
personal question,
Yeah,
just
so
in between.
yes. No, the prompts were quite generic. So
Yeah,
they were specific for ROB2, but not for any medical discipline or so. So we also included all types of RCTs. So yeah, we did not exclude any types of research questions also. But
yeah.
of course, all were intervention trials, RCTs, but yeah, not limited
Hmm.
to any medical field.
Yeah. I add another question to this point. To improve efficiency of risk of bias assessment, which is very time consuming, would you recommend to use Claude and have a human review and adjust Claude's answers?
Yeah, not so easy, but no, I won't do it, because there was really not good agreement. And it can also, or from my point of view, if you see those answers by Claude, I mean, they sound really good. They sound like, maybe you also have made the experience with ChatGPT or so, that the answers sound really credible. And Claude also does not tell, oh, I'm not sure about this point. You won't get this response of Claude, but you just get information which is very plausible. And then I would be afraid that I just believe this, and that I would be not so, yeah, that just my own review would be maybe not so thorough, or yeah, or detailed. So I would not do it by myself. I also don't do it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think you also pointed out this in the conclusion that one should be very careful here. So we have another question about the comparability. I think you made in the last couple slides, and the question is, how well can you compare interhuman agreement with AI human agreement if both the number of RCTs assessed and the number of people agreeing differs so greatly?
Um, yes, so from my point of view, we can I mean, it's the best we have. I'm not aware of any other studies assessing the agreement or inter-rater reliability of ROB2. So therefore, I think it's the best we have. Um, because of the 4 people, I think this is not a problem because they also calculated another type of kappa. And I may be wrong, or maybe Waldemar, you know more about the Fleisch kappa. I don't know about the calculation. So I'm not into this, but as far as I know or think, the Fleisch kappa should be okay to calculate it with 4 raters. So therefore, I think you can compare it. But of course, the number of RCTs, yeah, it would be good to have more RCTs tested, but yeah.
Yeah. I also think this question was less about the metric, about the type of the kappa inter-rater agreement metric, but more about the comparability of the maybe the um, features and characteristics of these inter-rater studies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but what I
yeah,
mean, of
yeah.
course, if you have 4 rater, the percent of agreement between those 4 may be much lower than if you have 2 raters. But what I wanted to say is that I think that Fleischkappa somehow corrects for this also. But I have to admit that I don't know much about the calculation of Fleischkappa.
Yeah. A related question is, what is considered to be good agreement or a range for a good agreement for the use of LLMs for assessing the risk of bias? Do you have any
Yeah.
recommendations here?
Yeah, this is also quite interesting question. I mean, we have for Cohen's kappa, we have a rough, interpretation mark. I think I think Landis and Koch were the ones who provided those. It was the one I also provided on one of my slides. So fair agreement or slight agreement and so on. We can use this one. But of course, in the studies I read on these topics, it's also quite different. Some authors, even if, for example, they take only percent of agreement, so they take only accuracy and say, well, we have really good agreement, which is, I think, not correct, because you can't just take a percentage of agreement to interpret. But so but I'm afraid I can't really give you a good answer to this. So you always have to look at ideally different metrics and make sure you have the whole picture.
Yeah. And also what you mentioned, I think it's very important what the reference standard is, and is it retrospective? Is it a fair comparison, or is it biased somehow? So yeah, absolutely agree. I have another interesting one about I read it. I'm wondering if Claude would perform better if you feed it with many examples of completed risk of bias with just justifications.
Yeah, that's an interesting one also. So I can't tell because I'm not aware of any study which did this or which really did this. Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe I've seen some studies or one study or so which provided one example or so, but it would be interesting to give a lot of examples and also to make some fine tuning, for example. This would be an interesting approach, I think.
Yeah. Last question. Um, is a comment or question interesting? The results were better with risk of bias 1 than risk of bias 2. Do you want to expand on this? Maybe this is about
Yeah,
the complexity of the tool where one
I think
uses.
so.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so. I think Rob 1 is just easier to apply also for humans and
Yeah.
also maybe for LLMs and AI in general.
Could this also mean that the robust RCT tool could perform better in such evaluations? Would be interesting to test this in future, maybe.
Yeah, Yeah, I absolutely agree.